Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
Welcome to Projections, our weekly show about VR. And it's especially exciting now because the movie Ready Player One is out. And
That's right.
In that movie, one of the technologies that Wade Watts, the lead character, uses is a treadmill system.
That's right.
In his van.
Yeah, in fact, it's a treadmill made by this company, Infinadeck, and you know that because the logo is in the movie.
Yeah, so we got to recently visit Infinadeck at their temporary setup at SVVR's headquarters in the Bay Area, where they had their latest prototype, and we got to use this omnidirectional treadmill.
What does that mean, Norman?
Well, it's a treadmill that, unlike a typical treadmill which only moves in one direction, it can not only move bidirectionally, but in all directions.
Yeah.
And we chatted with the CEO of Infinadeck, Ben Freeman, about the technology, how it works, and so let's jump to that now.
We've been in development for about 5 or 6 years now. The last 2 years we've been pretty quiet, hiding, doing R&D, getting things ready, getting us to this point. Last week we had our global launch party where we launched our beta test program and our software development kit. So
5 or 6 years, that would kind of sync up with the Oculus Rift Kickstarter. Was that an inspiration for this product? Or?
Actually, the founder, George Berger, he was playing or watching his son playing a game, and his son said, "Hey, I want to be able to walk around and move around in it." And George, being the constant innovator and inventor, thought of the idea and started working on the designs.
So the idea, this is an omnidirectional treadmill, a lot of different locomotion hardware setups to try to solve the locomotion problem in VR. You guys are a treadmill that moves in all directions, which is different than like a pad that you can slide around, right? Mm-hmm. How does the hardware, how does it work? How does the treadmill go in all directions?
So it's a patented technology, so I can't get into too much detail about it, but in essence, it's a treadmill on a treadmill. So you've got a treadmill that goes in one direction with smaller treadmills going in the other direction.
So it's like an X and Y. So
correct.
I can walk in one direction, and then I'm just engaging one motor. If I turn 90 degrees, then I'm just engaging another set of motors. And if I walk diagonally, I'm engaging both.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But that's not it, right? Like
no.
The idea is that the hardware allows it to feel like a frictionless surface, but you only have so much treadmill that the person's walking on. How does the system know where they're walking, how fast they're walking, and move along with a person's body?
So one thing I'll mention is it's not a frictionless surface. You want to have friction, because when you walk, you take a step, your foot doesn't slide. If it was frictionless, it would be like on ice,
right,
or on a sliding dish. With this, you're actually stepping on ground that's moving with you, just like a normal treadmill belt does. So the big challenge there is getting the controls to know where your body is, know where your intent to walk is, where you actually are walking, and at what pace. And
so how do you track the person's position within this circle?
So currently we use HTC Vive trackers and HTC headset. The trackers, we have one that matches your center of gravity, and then we've got other trackers that represent your feet and your hands, and then the headset matches your head. And a real key part of this is we don't need a harness. Depending on the application, you don't need a harness. And we're able to do this because we eliminate the need for the feel of like vertigo, nausea, things like that by our tracking system. Being able to see your body, being able to see this ring in VR. So if you get nervous, if you start to feel vertigo at all, you can grab onto the railing.
So the system knows how to accelerate, and when not to. That's all based on the tracking that's being done of the HTC Vive?
That's in our control algorithm and the Vive tracker, yes.
And how far away from center I walk?
Correct.
Okay.
So your calibration is that center tracker that's on the waistband relative to where it is on the Infinadeck,
correct,
that platform. Do you calibrate for height of person or weight of person?
That's all part of the algorithm.
Ah, so. Okay. And so that's something that's automatically determined when you step on. And
yeah, as we do the setup, we make sure it's set up for your body type. We've had someone who was 6'8" on this, and little kids at 4'6" and 4 feet tall. So
I'm just thinking about like a regular treadmill, not even omnidirectional, right? A standard treadmill that you might have an exercise at home, you control the speed, and you can run naturally on that. But that system is dictating your movements.
Right.
This is the other way around. I'm trying to wrap my head around, even on a one-directional treadmill, how you can walk and slow it and start it. That's not an easy problem to solve at all, even in one direction.
And keep the person standing.
Yeah.
It's very, very challenging problem. As you think about a normal treadmill, as you're walking on this treadmill, it's telling you how fast it is you want to go. It doesn't feel like walking outside or running outside because it's dictating your pace.
Yeah.
When you go run outside, you're dictating your pace. As you get tired, you go slower. As you get more energy, you go faster. On this, we're using our control algorithm to help manage where your body is, so we keep you centered on the treadmill, along with controlling your speed.
And
so
it needs
speed.
response.
Let's talk about speed for a second. So you had us capped around 2 or 3 miles per hour, but I understand that that was just a dial that you have in the software. How fast can this go?
So it can go up to about 8 miles an hour, and typically until people get really, really comfortable on it, we don't want to go any faster than that. So in demonstration purposes, we cap it at that.
Do you guys take it at 8 miles an hour?
I've seen it about 6.5 miles an hour. I get nervous on it, but I hang on when I go that fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's capped.
We saw an omnidirectional treadmill in Ready Player One.
Yeah.
He jumps on and he starts running on it immediately. Is that the goal of this eventually, that someone can jump on and just start running?
Eventually, we'd like it to be where it could be used for fitness applications, where people can get on and exercise on it in a virtual reality fitness center, where they can put a virtual reality headset and go run against their favorite Olympic athlete, or go race against a car running, or a cheetah, or an animal in Africa. All those different things we want to be able to do. It's just, at this point in time, we want to make sure everybody's safe as they're on it.
So besides virtual reality fitness, what are some of the other commercial applications you'd like to see this used in?
Great question. So virtual reality gaming centers is one of our target markets. The medical industry for physical rehabilitation, cardiac rehabilitation, stroke rehabilitation. There's lots of different medical applications. And then you can go into training, where a firefighter in training can go with you put 5 of these together with their whole team as they go into a burning house. They can practice going into a burning house and what they're supposed to do going into that, or a SWAT team going into a hostile environment.
Are you imagining all these applications are using virtual reality, or just
all in virtual reality?
Oh.
So you build a house and you set it on fire,
right,
and the firefighters have to get in and put out the fire and save somebody in the environment.
You know, when we first put this on, there was a little bit of an onboarding period. We had to almost relearn how to walk to accommodate this treadmill. How would you best describe the type of walking that is best suited for this treadmill versus, I mean, ideally, we want to be walking as naturally as possible.
Sure. So this is a big challenge that I see with everybody who gets on this at first. You have to relearn how to walk naturally. You have to learn to trick your brain in trusting that the ground is going to be there. You're not going to walk off the edge. You're not going to fall down. And what we did with you is we put you on there first, so you got comfortable with it. Without the virtual reality headset, you could walk in any direction. You could feel it. And then after that, we put the virtual reality headset on and gave you some pointers of how to walk in different ways, not leaning forward, kind of hanging onto the side, not marching, things like that. And over a few minutes, within an hour, I'm pretty confident that you'd feel comfortable walking without your hands.
My natural tendency was to want to march, because that felt safe.
Yeah.
But that's not natural.
Nope.
So you're saying that by letting your body walk more naturally, let go of those inhibitions, the system is best suited for that.
Absolutely. It's retraining your mind to be comfortable walking and trusting that the virtual world is there. And that's why you see a lot of people look down at their feet as they're walking in the virtual world, because they want to make sure their foot is really there. They're not sure that the ground is right there where they expect it to be. And as we make more advancements in our controls, it'll be more natural and easier to see your body through the movements.
How heavy is this?
It's about 500 pounds.
Okay, so I'm in virtual reality and I'm walking around and there's a hill, and I can go to walk towards the hill, and I'm imagining it wouldn't be technically too difficult to actually raise the side of it till I could actually be walking up a hill to some degree. But maybe at 500 pounds, that's not as trivial as I thought.
It's definitely possible when it's in the mix for some time in the future.
Oh, cool.
Now you told us this is about the fifth iteration of the Infinadeck that's closer to product launch. What are the improvements been? What has gotten you to this fifth iteration?
Well, some of that's trade secrets that we don't want to talk too much about, but a lot of it was really noisy and rackety, sounded like a train going down a train track. We've quieted the system down quite a bit, and we have some additional improvements that we can do. We want to make it as smooth as possible as you walk, and that's an important thing for us. Also, being able to track your body better. The original unit was manual. We had a person off to the side following you with a joystick saying where you needed to go.
Oh, wow.
We built the controls. We built controls with the harness where we had some feedback from the harness. And then we're now at where we're using the Vive trackers.
I mean, that latency, that response time has to be instantaneous, because I could be changing my direction on the fly, shifting my center of gravity to very pinpoint. Just because I'm lifting one foot off doesn't mean that I'm intentionally going to be taking a small step versus a big step. That all needs to be accommodated for.
Yeah, there's a lot into that control algorithm to know where to go, when to go. And you know, if you can think about in sports, when you see someone running down the road and all of a sudden they juke and want to go sideways, eventually we have to be able to deal with those for esports games.
Is this the only size that you guys are engineering right now?
No, we can make this as big or as small as it needs to be. We could do a full room like a holodeck.
That's interesting, right? Because from my perspective, having only used it for 10 minutes, the distance between the center and the extremity is all you have to measure in order to ramp up the speed to maximum. And maybe, if I want to go fast, I want more distance in order to gradually increase that speed. And it would be a more comfortable experience if I was traveling at faster speeds to have a wider surface to stand on. So that's interesting that the size of this is not limited to what is this?
It's about 6 foot by 6 foot.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So we looked at what a treadmill is and what the length of your stride normally is, and we wanted to be able to match that for a good walking pace, a brisk walking pace in both directions. And that's what this environment gives you. As we go faster, as we look at different applications, VR gaming centers, VR fitness, medical, they all depend on what options they have and what size they have. When you go into when you go into medical devices, many of those times you're going to want to have a harness on there to help a person take some of the weight off of their body. If you have a knee replacement, you don't necessarily want to be walking full weight right away. So you want to be able to augment that and make it a little bit easier for them as they grow and change, and their therapists and their team that are helping them can work with that.
As you're improving the algorithm and getting it to feel like it's reading your mind more, what more inputs do you wish the system had? I mean, you have the HTC tracker now, but what more would help the system be more responsive?
That's a very difficult question to answer. There's a lot of different things that we're exploring and that we're working with a lot of different partners on that task.
But that seems that as that improves, then you're confident that then the algorithm will improve and it will feel more natural and more responsive. Very cool. So the plans for this, as you guys are close to a product launch?
So we did our product launch. We've got the beta test. We're planning on shipping beta test units by the end of this year, and then we're hoping that we can get some software developers developing some software with our SDK, and then as we ship these units out later this year, we can get the user feedback, see how they feel, get the experience back, and then build onto that both on our controls and on our games and things like that, and work with our partners.
Have you announced any kind of price point yet?
No.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks.
All right, Jeremy. So clearly the Infinadeck, as it works right now, it does not work how it is portrayed in Ready Player One.
In the movie, Wade Watts steps on it and starts running immediately, and runs full blast, right? And then he turns 90 degrees and does the same thing.
Right. It's basically like how the holodeck would work, in that you would need to be able to feel like you could locomote, walk or run in any direction, although you're physically not moving.
And I think that's the dream.
That's the dream, and I think a treadmill idea is a really good idea to do that. What we realized after using it is that's a really tough problem to solve.
Sure. I mean, I would expect it to be.
Because it's not in the same way as walking on what I thought was a frictionless surface and just keep on skidding and moving your legs. The system needs to know how much resistance to give you.
All right, so my experience on walking on this thing was quite comfortable walking in a direction. And especially if it was in line with one of the two axes, right? I would start walking and I could not touch the rail and I could change my speed and be relatively comfortable doing that.
And think about that. That's itself not an easy problem to solve because the treadmill is motorized. You are not moving the treadmill with the force of your own legs.
Not at all.
It is moving itself, and there's like a little bit of a calibration period where it's centering. It's moving based on where it thinks your center of gravity is.
Well, it's based on how far away from center I am. Like, that's the thing. I'm not sure it considers center of gravity as much as it needs to. But if I traveled in one direction, comfortable. If I stopped, turned in any other direction and started walking, I would say equally comfortable. And that is actually cool. Like,
responsive, no latency there.
Yeah.
It moved, like how quickly it moved from going forward to left and right to diagonal. That 2-axis treadmill system works.
Totally. Yeah, and all based on a single puck that you are wearing around your waist. It's how far away that puck moves from the center of the treadmill that it uses to determine how fast the treadmill needs to move and in what direction.
And the treadmill that we used was capped at around 3 miles per hour.
Right.
Although this can go up to 8 miles per hour, which would be a pretty good run.
Yeah. No, absolutely. They wouldn't allow us to do that because that's the slightly steeper learning curve. You can imagine you have the same distance from center to extremity that has to equate to a
full
much
stride,
longer, a much faster speed once you get further out.
You would be running in place essentially.
Right. Yeah.
So the pad they talked about, I know Ben said like 6 feet by 6 feet. That's the dimensions of the whole thing. There was still a lot of bezel there. I think actual usable surface felt more like 4.5 feet by 4.5 feet, which I still felt like was a little bit constricting. Maybe that's because of the way it was tracking where I was in relative to the center of the pad, but I felt myself pushing up against the edges, that ring, pretty fast.
I was holding the ring a lot when I was experimenting with trying to walk in a circle and change directions. And that when I was doing that, perfectly comfortable. Like, I really had no problem with that, even if it was a part of the experience.
It almost felt like pushing a shopping cart around.
Sure.
And it was, for that, if you're going to get like a cart pushing simulator, this is perfect for that.
But you would like to not have that because even seeing the bar in VR reduces the immersion factor. Like, why do I have this strange bar around me that's augmented on this,
It's your shield. It's
in this forest. So I wanted to do it without holding it. And straight lines, no problem. Turning, I kept falling, getting, uncomfortable and losing my balance. And I don't know if that was mental or if that was just a fact of the physics. And I think it was probably a fact of the physics. I think that there's something that happens that the machine is not
compensating or adjusting for, because the way you walk isn't just by where your body is relative to the middle. If you're walking forward, sure, you could abstract that, but you walk in a whole bunch of different ways. If I walk sideways, that's a whole different mechanism. I don't think you can really walk sidestep easily with this mechanism, with this device. I tried and I was losing my footing a little bit. In fact, just walking like you said and trying to turn, my feet were kind of crossing each other because I was trying to stay balanced. And the moment my feet have to try to stay balanced, it means the machine isn't doing something, isn't compensating properly.
You and I were talking afterwards on the ride home, like, what would it take to make this even more comfortable so that you could do that kind of thing? And maybe the single point is the limiting factor. So he had mentioned that children have an easier time with it, and maybe that's because they're younger, more fertile minds, and they can just absorb new experiences. Or maybe it's because they have a lower center of gravity.
And they're lighter.
Less mass. And that has something to do with it. I mean, maybe if they could scan our whole body with a Kinect or a series of scanners so that they sense our entire volume and where all of our mass is and detect our changing center of gravity, that might give them more input into what that treadmill needs to be doing.
Yeah, there's some body tracking technologies that can latch onto your muscles, just get your electrical impulses. And those actually are supposed to predict anticipate your body movements faster than a visual system or even a hand controller system. And maybe that is a system that could give this Infinadeck system, their software, their algorithm, enough input so that it can adjust quickly enough. It wasn't that there was a lot of latency.
No.
Like when I was walking forward, it was a comfortable, 2 mile per hour stride, but that's not going to be sufficient if we're going to want to be running in a game.
I felt like, maybe running in a single direction would actually work. They said that they've unlocked the speed, and now that they've spent enough time in it, they're actually very comfortable in it. There's clearly a learning curve that you just need to experience. This is an interesting device. I want to know how it works underneath because it sounds simple enough with 2 axes, but there's a lot of these tiny little treadmills that have to wrap around. They wouldn't show us underneath there. That's the secret sauce. I'm curious on a mechanical level how it all works.
My guess is magnets. It's got to be.
Yeah, they did say that it will run on 110, so you can just plug it into an outlet and it should work.
Yeah. It is clearly a device not meant for yours or my home right now. Not just for whatever pricing they're going to have it at, but at a 500-pound unit at this early stage of the software, it definitely makes more sense for, and software needs to be made for it.
Right.
It makes more sense for location-based experiences that can have very controlled setups.
Right. I do feel the issues that they have with the tracking, a lot of that, it felt like something that could be solved with software, like the first several steps, because like you said, it was low latency. It wasn't like there was a lag and we hit the edge of the rail before we meant to. Like if we walked too fast, we could. But I would love to see this after another iteration, just to see how much they've managed to accomplish. Apparently their older prototypes, the people who tried the old ones and then the new ones, they're amazed at how far they've come, even in that amount of space. I think that this has a lot of promise.
I'm just also not convinced fundamentally that an omnidirectional treadmill is going to work for the type of movements. Like I think even in the perfect scenario where it can anticipate my movements and respond and change direction instantaneously, my feet just, we don't walk in one direction. Our feet can walk in, sideways, sidestep. Our feet independently of each other. And this assumes that you're always going to be moving your feet in one singular direction.
You were explaining to me how the holodeck works, according to people who read the technical Star Trek manuals. And that's supposedly like the best they've come up with is a series of very small omnidirectional treadmills.
Yep.
Do you think that kind of thing would potentially actually work?
One for each foot? Yeah,
maybe. Or several.
Yeah, we're way far away from that right now. It's really exciting, and we're really fun to actually get to try a technology like this. It still feels like the early days, but it is promising stuff.
Yeah.
Next up, we have a preview of a game that just got announced today from Oculus Studios, developed by Twisted Pixels, their next AAA title for VR. It's called Defector. And this is a completely different game than the last game they made, Wilson's Heart.
Yeah.
In that was a very slow pace, also a very long AAA title game. Horror story. This is an action adventure.
It's come a long way since they started, which was just after Wilson's Heart ended. I'm impressed by how much they've accomplished in that short amount of time.
They say it's inspired by action films like The Bourne Identity and also the Fast and Furious heist films. We got a chance to play some of Defector and chat with the developer of it, so let's jump to that interview right now. So Josh, tell me, what is Defector?
Yeah, man, Defector is what we're kind of aiming to make kind of like the ultimate spy VR experience. So internally we were like, if it were, based on movies, it would be like Jason Bourne and James Bond mixed with the Fast and the Furious, and like trying to combine those together and just make a crazy action, like spy adventure, basically.
Your guys' last game was Wilson's Heart, a very different kind of game, even though both narrative games, a very long game. Were these games in development at the same time, or what led to a fast-paced adventure, action adventure, being the direction you guys wanted to go in?
Yeah, no, actually we developed this right after Wilson. We started right away. And the idea, Wilson was kind of more of a somber, slow, kind of steady build-up with horror and kind of, all these types of things. And we wanted to do something different with Defector, where we're trying to replicate the console experience or maybe even the PC experience a little bit more in VR. So really to let you go out and do all types of crazy stuff, have more kind of branching paths, let you choose what to do. We just thought it would be really cool versus such a linear kind of single style, do what we tell you to do type of approach that a lot of games do in VR.
One of the first things I noticed when I put the headset on was there were a lot of movement options. VR, the Rift is 2 years old now. People have a touch for a while. Are you guys enabling more different movement options because you feel like VR users are more comfortable moving openly in a VR world?
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So what you saw is just kind of a small, very kind of beginnings of what we're trying to do with the movement. We're going to offer tons of different kind of movement options and changing your walking speed and your running speed and your turn speed, all these things, tunneling, anything somebody needs in order to enjoy the game. We want to make sure they have the option to do that. So we're going to probably over option it out, but I think that's better than just kind of forcing them to just kind of use one way.
And there's a lot of walking around, free-form walking around, but then you also have the user do things like sit down in chairs, get in the cars, you're flying through the air at some point. So how much of that is going to be in the game? How much switching around between those? And what are some of the things that we haven't even seen yet, potentially?
Quite a bit, man. With some of the stuff like you saw with like sitting down, we're still messing with, okay, is this a situation that's easier just to kind of quickly blink out and sit you down, which is what we're doing right now, versus like, okay, are we going to actually force people to try to do that? It all comes down to if it's fun or not, and to get you into the fun as quick as we can. So for instance, things in VR like, hey, I want to slide down a pole, or I want to climb up a ladder. How can we do that without making you sick and without always blinking and teleporting? So those are the type of things we're working on right now, and we're doing some pretty cool stuff that I'll be excited to show in some later levels.
You're also interacting with a lot of NPCs, whether actually interacting or passively interacting by just wandering in their space. So there's dialogue options I saw. How other ways will NPCs react to you or notice? Because you have a lot of information you can tell the system with head movement, where your gaze is at, where your hands are at. How will they react to your movement?
Yeah, so we're experimenting with that right now. As far as like, hey, someone doesn't want you to look at them and I'm staring you in the face, they may pull out a gun and shoot you if they don't like that. Or how I interact with someone, if I keep messing with them, that's going to piss them off. I might get killed that way, or something different might happen that I didn't want to happen. So trying to make it just not walk up and hit a button and you just kind of watch what happens. You have the opportunity to do all types of, hopefully cool stuff. So that just takes time, and we're trying to make sure that the characters in the game can react accordingly to the things we want to do.
Are those things that you're all going to want to telegraph very clearly to the player, or even things that you let the player discover subtly? Because as I was walking into a room with all the enemies, the player wants to role play, right? You want to pretend you're sneaking around, but I don't know if the systems are detecting those things. Is that something that your team can add in over time, and how much you want to enable the player to role play sneaking around like a spy?
So we're doing a little bit of both. I mean, for things that, hey, urgency, right? You need to do this in order to kind of press forward. We'll have UI objects that kind of come up, especially with the contact in your eye. We have, a reason to show all these things in the world now. Where in Wilson, we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep it as you're as Wilson. So some cases we'll show UI. Other things will not really tell you what to do, because we want you to go out and experiment and kind of mess around with things just to see what happens. And there are so many ways to replay the levels and so many objectives to hit that only by messing around will you actually be able to kind of hit all those objectives.
And so what we played was just part of one level in one airplane, potentially to another airplane. How expansive is this going to be? What's the scope of it?
Yeah, we're going big, man. So the portion you played is just part of that level. It ends at a certain point, and there's more to that level that we're not showing yet. But really trying to go big on the scope and really try to have a lot of reasons to replay these levels. We think the branching and the objectives are a good reason to do that. And it's easily accessible. We'll have a hub in the game where you'll be able to go back and re-choose the levels and all that good stuff. So like Wilson, just trying to keep building it in VR so people can, like I said, have that kind of quote-unquote kind of console experience in VR, and what makes it worth playing in VR, basically.
You guys mentioned that the Bourne films and Fast and Furious were some influences. Are you looking at the whole spectrum of modern action films and picking out like the dream scenarios from those films that you want to let players recreate?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I think it's one of those things where we want to kind of pick situations we think are cool, turn it into our own thing, and then make sure we can pull that off without people just like wanting to either take off the helmet. We don't want to get people sick. We want people to take off the helmet and basically like, oh my God, I got to show that to someone. Like, here, you got to try this. That's what we're going for. That's what makes VR cool. So going all the way with that.
And how far is Defector along?
We'll be releasing towards the end of this year. So we're a decent amount in, but there's still a lot to go.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. Great to see you.
Man. Appreciate it. Thanks again.
All right, Norm, so you and I both had a chance to play, and we ended up taking slightly different paths.
Yes.
What did you think?
I am impressed by how ambitious they are in terms of making an action-adventure story. The fact that they let you freely roam. The level we were playing was an airplane, and we were freely roaming through this airplane, interacting with NPCs in all sorts of ways, passively by just listening to what they were saying.
You did a lot more of that, where you would go up to the NPCs and get in their business a little bit.
Right.
And you discovered that you can't do that.
Yeah, right. They are aware of you getting too close to them.
Yeah.
Of course, the system knowing that you're tracking your head, where you're looking at, and where your hands are, you can knock things out of their hands and they get pissed off. So you have to play a spy, essentially.
Right.
And that system obviously has room for improvement, and there's no foveated tracking here, but that's one of these things where this is where games are going, where
Right.
every little subtle movement you have being in the game affects how the world responds to you.
It reminds me a little bit of the direction Warren Spector was taking with Deus Ex and Thief and those kind of games, where it seems that there are different ways you can approach any problem.
Yeah,
And especially in the interrogation stuff. I don't know if that's a direct parallel to the Warren Spector games, but there's certainly different paths you can take. And if you do the right thing, then you unlock certain elements in the world. If you convince the person that you're interrogating that you're on his side, then he'll get up and take a break, and you can then go and open his briefcase and get an item that you wouldn't otherwise get in that playthrough.
And that sounds like where a lot of the replayability of this game is going to come from, in unlocking that checklist of Easter eggs or submissions that you can tackle. Like you could, one part of the game, we're rushing through it. We jump into a conversation with the boss of that level to do an interrogation moment. But if we want to hang around, loiter, we have to pay attention to where those NPCs are looking, so that they're not looking in our direction, they can be distracted, and then we can rummage through their things and find some extra bonuses. There's also a lot of combat in this game.
Not enough for me. Like
yeah?
the trailer that we saw before we started, that was mostly combat and action. And then it turned out that there's this whole other side of it that is this more methodical, stealthy element to the game, which, like you said, lends itself to VR. But I was excited for the action. And so when we got to the action, my path that I took had a little less of it than yours. You had this whole shootout.
I had a whole shootout on an airplane.
How'd that feel?
It was awesome. So they use a lot of the VR benefits. You have some augmented reality systems for menus and contextual clues, things that get popped up so you know where to shoot certain enemies. There's a whole fisticuffs combat system.
That looked cool. Like it would highlight areas of the body that you had to hit, but then you also had to be defensive, right?
Yep. So it's a whole boxing game, mini game that you get put into. I didn't like that boxing mini game was basically cordoned off, sectioned off into its own thing. That could have been just for this tutorial element.
You're saying that would be nice if that was just part of the combat.
Just part of it, where I could be shooting and then boxing and then shooting right in that same flow.
Right.
And it's heavily, like, there's a lot of action scripted in here. Don't want to go into too many spoilers, but like it felt like a big budget action film.
Oh yeah, no, I jumped out of a plane and then I grabbed onto another plane and was like climbing up the outside of it.
Yeah.
You, I think, flew into another plane.
With a car. Yeah.
With a car.
Exactly. Things you find right out of these Fast and Furious films.
Yeah.
So they're definitely taking these inspirations from these big budget films, and I think that's something that VR has been missing. We've had good single player experiences. You know, you have things like Wilson's Heart, slower pace, more atmospheric. You've had, things like Robo Recall, just nothing but action, but not heavy on story. And then you have Lone Echo, which is heavy on story, but also a more slower pace.
Right.
Now you're getting something more akin to like a Bourne game or like a Fast and Furious game.
Right. Do you think this is a higher budget game for that reason?
I think it feels like it for sure.
They said that we only played part of one level, and that the entire game would be a nice chunk 4 or 5 hour experience, although they hesitate to give an actual figure.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of game, especially with those replayability elements to it. They were saying there's different, like in the room that we were in, above the garage, they were saying that you could shoot that glass and go straight down to the cars and just skip a whole bunch of that level if you chose to do that.
Yep, I mean, that's what VR is about. You want to do the things, you want to experiment with the world, and it becomes more believable if you start doing things that you want to do and the world actually reacts to it. So they build those systems in. Oculus has said they're spending the same amount of money on fewer games this year, not just pushing a ton of games out. So this feels like one example of that, and it'll come out later this year. Can't wait to play the rest of it. One final game we want to talk about coming out sooner than later is a game we played at GDC, Beat Saber.
Yeah, it's basically Jedi Dance Dance Revolution.
Yes, rhythm music game. You may have seen some of these mixed reality videos on Facebook that got a lot of views, and we could attest the game is just as fun as those videos make it look like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a game that I think when you watch the videos, you don't even understand all the elements.
Right.
Like,
so you have let's call them lightsabers. You have these laser swords in your hands. They look and sound like lightsabers.
I think those are both of those terms are now owned by Lucas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have haptic effects, so you can, as you strike them against each other, the controllers vibrate. But these cubes are coming at you, and the cubes have arrows indicated on them.
Right.
Telling you what direction to swing it at,
right.
And you have to swipe through the cubes to get the beat.
But there are two colors, so there's red and blue, and you have to hit one of them with your right and one with your left. And sometimes they're on different sides. So there's a video where the player starts hands crossed because the two that first come at her are on opposite sides. And then there's a lot of like switching when you go left and right. And obviously there's difficulty levels, but it's all handcrafted. That's the great thing. It's not a game where it's interpreted, the game interprets the music and puts notes where it thinks the kick might be in the snare drum. It's all hand done in a way that you might expect from like a rock band or a Guitar Hero.
It's not the first music rhythm game we've seen in VR. It's one where you punch the beats, and that one is algorithmically generated. But the idea of having these light swords in your hand and the satisfaction of slicing through one with the beat, I think comes across really well.
I asked the developer, is there an accuracy to slicing, getting it right on the beat? Because usually in these kind of games, there is. Like if you want to do it right on the note, and if you do, you get bonus points. He said,
do you get more points if you slice them right in half?
Right, he said actually no, because there's not enough time to miss it. Like if you miss it, you're way off beat. So they come by so quickly that if you manage to hit it, you're pretty much in time with the music.
And it's not precision in terms of your stroke either. They don't want you necessarily to cut it in half. They just want you to hit the beat.
They tried it.
They tried it, but then people were just standing very still and doing perfect
robotic
slices.
movements.
And they want people to be flailing their arms and getting into it. It's like the ultimate drumming game.
It is very percussive. And there's also these walls that come by, and you have to step to avoid those or sometimes duck beneath them. I haven't seen them come so low you have to jump over them, but I mean, they can't track that. So I guess that's not something that we'll see in this generation.
Yeah, so that one is coming out real soon. We can't wait to play it. We want to put that on your radar along with other games and hardware we talked about. So that does it this week for Projections. We'll be back next week with more game demos and hardware talk. Thanks for watching. Like this video, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.